For some of you, today may be the day that everything changed, right? I mean, we've really had some good information today. But I can actually remember exactly when my work changed. So see, I'm a social justice educator. So for a really long time, I was working around social justice issues from a now mindset. What I mean by that is that everything needed to happen right now. There was a sense of urgency and people didn't get it. I also was generally angry and fairly unsuccessful. So it's interesting, no matter how much your burning issues are really passionate, you really get this sense of urgency, it really doesn't matter because not everybody's on the same boat, right? Like no matter how angry you are, your anger is not a good recruitment tool. Have you noticed that? So I would try and burn brighter and brighter and brighter. Whether I was talking about equity amongst genders or sexism or racism or doing anti-oppression work or transphobia work, I would get more and more enfuegoed, and I'd only really tend to focus on the people who didn't seem to even notice, right? So you're all these people too. We're all fired up about something. Then there's them, right? The deniers. They don't think dinosaurs happened. They think we're in a post-racial society, right? That just because women don't get paid evenly, that doesn't matter. It's because they have babies, right? Like there's all different kinds of stuff out there that they don't necessarily want to talk about the topics I want to talk about. What I found myself doing is that's who I was focusing on, right? If I could make them come to my side, it was a big win. And I was out for the big wins. I would focus on them solely, to the point that I literally got burnt out. I found myself, I didn't even want to do my own work anymore. I didn't want to organize with people. I didn't want to talk about these subjects anymore because I was absolutely exhausted. I didn't see any progress. I didn't see any recruitment numbers. I realized one day I didn't need any more t-shirts, and it was very sad. And I found myself a giant burnt piece of toast. So, like every white upper-class woman I know where I live, I went to a shrink. What do? Like I used to really care, and now I can't care. It just seems like my work is completely worthless. And like a good shrink, she says, all the answers are already within you. That's $85, please. Thank you. I just saved you a shrink lesson. You're welcome. So I left there and I thought, okay, all the answers are with me already. So what am I really thinking about? And I kind of like caved up and I really tried to pay attention to what are my barriers? What are preventing me from going to work? So the first thing that came to mind is this little gem from a statistician. And that is essentially all models are wrong, but some are useful. The reason why that struck me was that I didn't see that I was making great progress, but doesn't it kind of matter anyway? Right? Like, if you don't see quantitative difference, isn't your work important anyway? So then I started thinking of like activist models and people who came before me and movements that came before me. And I'm really critical and I see all the mistakes they made, but it mattered. The work they did mattered. So how do I get kind of back engaged there? That was one thing. Then, this little pesky bugger, and that is that we are commanded to love our neighbor. That means that we must be able to do that. If I am commanded to function on this planet out of love, that means that I am supposed to be able to do that. It seems like I've made an Olympic sport out of hating people, so how can I get back to love? And if I could get back to love, maybe that would somehow be self-motivating, right? Like, how do I do that? So I started kind of pondering with those things, and like any good activist who can't figure out a good answer, I decided to change the subject. So I didn't know what I was doing, so I decided, let's try capitalism for just a second, right? Channel change. So I identified for a very long time as an anti-capitalist entrepreneur. I did not go to business school, so I have to kind of teach myself different business models, and I ran across this. This is Rogers' innovation adoption curve. Now, what's interesting about this particular curve, and I'm not going to go into the entire theory, although I do find it kind of fascinating that every theory is a bell curve. But in this particular one, the idea is where would you spend your marketing dollars, right? So bear with me, major channel change, but this is how my brain works. So where am I going to spend my marketing dollars on my products or my speaking career or things like that? When I ran across this bell curve, basically the cliff notes is that way over there on your left are the early adopters. These are the innovators, the yes people. They are stoked about your product. The ones over here on my side are the laggards. They're not interested. They're not buying. So in my experience, the only time I've really ever been an early adopter would be Harry Potter books. So I would stand in line, I'd buy a copy early, and I'd stand in line at midnight, generally not in costume, but with people in costume, and wait for the next book to come, right? So I was there. It didn't even matter if the book would ever be terrible, which of course they never were, and it was fabulous and wonderful, and of course I bought it. I'm an early adopter when it comes to Harry Potter. Not when it comes to like microwaves or cell phones, but some people are, right? Some of you already know when the next iPhone thing is coming out. What are we on, 6 now? It's a little interesting to think of that in reference to the last talk. But there are other people who are laggards, right, who still haven't read Harry Potter, or maybe they haven't even seen the movies, or they don't have a cell phone. So if you're going to be doing marketing on either of those products, you wouldn't spend your time and money there, right? They're not buying. If you can focus on the people who are buying, it will eventually cross this chasm. When it crosses this chasm, it's on its way to becoming almost ubiquitous. This is a really important thing to understand when we're talking about a business model. And when you're thinking about what it is you're passionate about, and when I think about my social justice work, something clicked. And that is, I've been focusing on the wrong people. I've been focusing on the big wins so that I could feel right, instead of turning around and focusing on the people who were already there. Think of the last time you went to an event or an organized program or something like that. One of the first statements that we typically say is, ugh, not enough people showed up. What about the people who did show up? We need to flip our mindset. Now, if I layer on here some social justice theory, are you ready for some boom theory drops? Here we go. So this is what all this equals. I don't like graphs, so I turned it into a mountain. So there you go. So same bell curve. Are you with me? Okay, here are the little pieces. So same bell curve. So you see the laggards in red, right? Okay, so most of our work tends to focus on them. Again, like the big wins. So if we call this into social justice theory, this is compassionate exhaustion. This is when we care so much we will become toast. And that's how systems of oppression win, is that they just burn us out one at a time. It's gonna win, it's patient. All it needs is croutons for its salad. Here we are. Are you with me? Right, snaps. Okay, so we have compassionate exhaustion. Then we could flip around and pay attention to the other side. When I worked with students and advised student groups, there were always the students who were always in my office, and I eventually hated them because I couldn't be late to work because everyone I worked with would know I was late because they were sitting in my office, not in my office yet. Obviously a sign I had slept in, right? But if we focus on these people who are already there, they already bought the t-shirt, they're already there in the morning, they are stacking chairs waiting for you to get there. Those folks, that's called radical amazement. And if we can stay in radical amazement, we will self-motivate into this work. We will keep doing what we believe in, even if we don't see quantifiable results. That is amazing and incredible. Now, the other thing that's really important to know about radical amazement is that it is dependent on us breaking down the biggest excuse that's standing in our way to actually making real change. When we get to radical amazement, sometimes it doesn't feel sexy enough. And I use that word on purpose because of how things have been like twisted in the media. But if we can get to this place and we can eradicate our biggest excuse, our biggest stumbling block, we can actually make change. The biggest stumbling block for us doing our work is what I call us versus them. As long as we have a paradigm of an us versus them, there's us that believe what we're fighting for and them. Those of you that identify as environmentalists, I was one of your them for a really long time. I just learned how to recycle within this decade. But you know what? I learned because I was interested. And if you'd written me off, you would have never been able to teach me how to do that. I'm composting now. What? Things happen. But we have to be able to break this down. When there's something different, it doesn't always mean it's a them. It just means it's an opportunity. We need to realize that what's really under our control, what we can actually change, is our behaviors, what we're going to focus on and what we're going to do. But typically, we have this dialogue around me and you, and then we judge the you. For you, coincidentally, this is you, this is me, right? This is how grammar works. So you're you, and I'm my me. Do you see how that's complicated? So me and you doesn't work. But then some smarty in the audience will be like, oh, no, but what about us and them? That's the kicker. That's where we have group dynamics now, and we know who to target the them, except them, and us-uns. What team are we really on? Who's us and who is them? So that doesn't work either, right? So if grammatically this excuse doesn't hold up, what it really leaves us with is one thing, and that one thing is we. We are it. We have learned a lot in our lifetimes, and we have a lot left to learn. But if we can collaborate together with everything that we're actually passionate about, no matter what it is, whether it's spotted owls or racism or trans inclusion, we are in this together. And interestingly, if we actually rely on each other, we can actually change the world. We can. I believe that. Now, before you go and stereotype me as some motivational, inspirational speaker, right? I know what's going on in your heads. What about that guy? Right? And it's always a guy for some reason, right? I know a lot of women who would fit into that category. But no, you don't understand. There's this one person or this one group, right? Yeah, maybe they're total donkeys. That is possible, right? Really challenging to work with. So take a little moment and pay attention to when that voice fires in your head and creates that us-them moment. In that moment, I want you to think about not them being a them, but when do we show up that way in our own group? When are we a them to somebody else? If we can focus on how we are and how our work is connected to each other, then we will actually be fulfilling a Hopi prophecy. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. It is time for us to rise and get to work, no matter what that work is, no matter how little of a quantitative difference we're going to see. It's up to us. Thank you very much.